beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of WTF What's the Frequency with me, your host, Vanessa Elston. And can I say, before anything else, thank you so much for watching, for listening, and subscribing. I am incredibly grateful to you all. I didn't know where I was going to get to when I started this podcast. I didn't know if it was going to be popular, but thanks to you and your support, I know that it is. So I'm going to keep going, and I'm very grateful to all of you. Now, this week, I've got some really exciting guests on. I've been so excited all week, I can't tell you. I've got Greg and Gail Hoog. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's a Dutch pronunciation. Now, they are multi-best-selling authors with books on sacred geometry, which is really fascinating and something I've been interested in for absolutely years. They have over 4 decades of dedicated expertise in this area, and they have illuminated the path to heightened awareness, transformation, stress reduction, and the removal of electromagnetic frequencies and magnetic frequencies that interfere with our field. And they're all about rising into the higher frequency. And as if that wasn't enough, they've pioneered groundbreaking technology that has touched the lives and improved wellness for people all around the world. So please join me in welcoming Gail and Greg to WTF What's the Frequency?
Oh, thank you for having us today, Vanessa.
Yeah, we really appreciate this time to come over the pond to be with you.
I know, and I'm very grateful to you because I understand you've had to get up very early, so I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you.
Isn't it wonderful technology that we can just connect across the world and resonate with each other? It's wonderful. So I'm so excited. I've got so many questions to ask you, but for our audience's sake, who perhaps haven't stumbled across sacred geometry before, what is it?
You know, sacred geometry is something that has been around before human beings. In our most recent book that's coming out in January, we explain that there are divine archetypes that are based on sacred geometric principles. And it's absolutely fascinating because the universe is constructed in very, very dynamic and specific ways. And sacred geometry explains all of this. And then it was up to people to be able to discover this and find the intrinsic connections that are essential for our well-being. So some people look at sacred geometry and look at these lovely images. We look at it from a different perspective. For one thing, being in a human body, we're three-dimensional. We're not two-dimensional beings. So what we've dedicated our work in these 40 years is with three-dimensional sacred geometric technologies, creating different kinds of things, tools and art objects and all kinds of wonderful things that support people in being able to resonate more completely with the universe and with all of the dimensions of who we are.
That's fascinating because one of the things we talked about when we met up, first of all, was the fact that we have a human crisis right now that is far more important to deal with and far more serious than climate change. What are your views on that? Because I know your work is completely dedicated to uplifting people. And yeah, I'd be really interested to hear what you think about this, because I am awash with people suffering from anxiety and depression.
Oh, and it's happening more and more. And so that's why climate change is somewhat like the canary in the coal mine, alerting us to an issue that's going on with humanity itself. And that difficulty that we're facing is that because of, well, actually, I have some images from our book that I could put up that might help explain this more clearly. Should
Oh,
I
please,
go to
please
that?
do. That would be wonderful.
Okay, let me find my way over there. Here. All right. So this is the way we envision human beings, like an iceberg. And the metaphor is that an iceberg is only 10% above water, the rest of it's hidden. And so it is with us as human beings. The majority of who we are exists on an emotional level, a mental level, a spiritual level, far beyond what we're seeing when we're looking at our physical bodies. And that the way energy flows, in this case from soul source, it flows through all the different levels of our multidimensional being until it gets in to the physical end, right here where we bump into stuff. This is our reality, our 3D reality. And on the right is another metaphor where soul is that ship on top of the ocean, pumping air and everything we need for survival down to the human being that's here on this planet. So, this flow of energy from soul, this flow of energy from higher self, this is crucial for our existence, our well being, our evolution, and any difficulty that we run into, all the diseases that we find in this dimension, it is a result of blockage or denial from source energy. So, what's going on with our emotional body or when we get stressed? And so that's what I'm showing you with this next image is how all of these different elements, when we talk about electromagnetic pollution, it puts a kink in that lifeline from soul. Stress does the same thing in blocking the energy from coming through. Negative emotions, all the emotions that come from the human body have been cultured from our need to survive. From that moment that we start realizing that we have a self here in this body, that's when the ego starts developing. And the ego is totally necessary for our survival. The challenge is that we get so used to it and it's so protective that we are hesitant to go beyond into the bigger part of ourselves. So
It's
the
really
judgment.
interesting that you're saying that, because I was only having a conversation about ego the other day and how
Mhm.
it's really necessary, but you've really got to bring it under control. Otherwise, it will control you and it will dictate your future to you.
And my way of dealing with ego sometimes is to engage it, give it something to do, really acknowledge its worth and its joy, like a little child that likes to color a coloring book. The adult doesn't come in and say, I can do it better. Let me show you how to do it. It's the play of doing it and everything. So the ego is engaged in everything that we do. It's just not the final say. That's where soul comes in. That's where compassion comes in. Because without that bigger picture, the ego is very small in the sense that it feels separate and it is easily wounded. And it is really working so hard to survive sometimes. And yet, universe is here to support us totally. We don't have to work at survival. We don't have to separate ourselves from spirit to feel that I'm in control. And so it's a it's a major thing that we're dealing with because of all the technology today is feeding right into the sense of separation. It's feeding into our inability to see the bigger picture and be part of the whole and see that we are here to be in service to all, because we're one large corporate body, and that is a universal body. And that's where the love exists when we move into that space.
That's a really interesting point, but I get it. I totally get it. When you're in service, when you're always looking to help others, you don't have to worry about earning money. You don't have to worry about there not being enough, there being lack, because it just turns up anyway. And I'm often quite surprised by that, actually. But can you just talk about that for a little bit? Because I think some people that are watching this might be thinking, yeah, that's all great. Lead with love and all the rest of it. But can you just explain to the audience what you mean by, we were talking about heart wisdom and soul connection, how that can actually deliver everything that you want, because it's all there, isn't it? Waiting to be gifted to us.
It truly is. It's so important what we're talking about here, because something, Vanessa, that we discovered when we were looking at these divine archetypes that created this universe, that created everything that we can see and touch and imagine, there is consciousness with it. And you know what that consciousness really is at the core? It's love. That is the creative principle. That is really what is the foundation of who we are. So when we're stressed, it's because we've left that. We're not maintaining that connection and allowing ourselves to be fueled by that. And the ego, unfortunately, sometimes, we talk about the wounds that people have. And those wounds are separation. It's something that actually is a deviation from what the truth is. What we are talking about and what we're working with everything that we've done for all these years is to support those connections. So no matter what happens, yes, there's always stress out in the world. You look at you hear the news, you look at what's going on around, and you recognize that, yes, there's some really rough things going on. However, we are beings of love. We were created in love. Our structure was designed in love. When we can come back home to who we really are, that's when we're full and we're capable of doing all that we can. And that part of that is receiving what's here, and receiving abundance, receiving health, receiving wonderful relationships. That is actually what's on the table for us. When we don't allow ourselves to take part of that, it's because there's something within us that's disconnected, that's not enabling us that full access to who we are. And so when we talk about we are multidimensional beings, it's not some weird and crazy thing. It's just the fact that we are beings that have so much capability, that have so many different facets and dimensions. The more you look into a gemstone like a diamond, you see more and more facets, and you see the light that emanates. Well, the same thing with us. The more we develop who we are, not just in a limited speck or in the places of our difficulties, but instead come back to the wealth, the extraordinary beingness of who we are, then all these things start to fall in place. And, I know that because you've been studying frequency, that our frequency is what it does the work. It's what is going to bring us all the things in life. So when we're happy, when we're joyful, when we're in that mode, we get more of that. When we're feeling miserable, we get more of that. So if you walk into a room and people are having just a really rough time and they're complaining and they're in their struggle, even if you walked in and you feel good before you walked in, you're going to feel that energy and it's not going to feel good to you. Now, on the other hand, if you are not feeling that great, but you're open to walking into a room and people are celebrating life, people are there being compassionate and helpful and considerate of each other, then before you know it, your guard starts to go down. Your frequency is actually rising, and more of that starts to come to you. It's very simple, actually, and the universe works in very elegant and simple ways. And when we learn that, then we have the keys to be able to have life become what some people think is magical. And maybe all it is bringing us into that place of resonance with what is possible for us.
And I think that is it, isn't it? Removing the fear and being creative with your thoughts, never thinking anything's a problem, but also at the same time, working with your heart, not your mind, because that's what's going to trick you. How do I feel in my heart about this business deal? How do I feel in my heart about, I don't know, going on a date? Really? You might be gorgeously good looking, but you may feel that they're not the right person, and you've got to listen to that, haven't you? And we're so switched off from that. I have people come to me and I know that they have abilities, but they're from families that are so switched off and so not awake that they almost feel that their intuition is a madness going on in their heads. That's where we've sort of come to in society, isn't it? That we're so distrusting of this innate ability that we have. And it's such a shame. Something you said there, it's actually quite simple, isn't it? But it's incredibly hard to do. And Gregory, your slides showed that when we are in alignment, we get more from source. We're enriched, aren't we, by the powers of the universe. So thank you so much for sharing this. But I want to really continue with this because I want to talk about the power of connection, because it's another thing that we've lost and we're not paying enough attention to, in my opinion. What do you think?
Well, it's not something that we can easily do by ourselves. I mean, that was the point of that slide, where there are things going on with the toxins in the environment that we can't escape. There are things going on with all the electromagnetic frequencies, with all of the stress and the speed in the world. It makes it overwhelmingly difficult to just kind of pull back and say, oh, I'm going to play a Pollyanna game and I'm going to say, oh, I don't care. It doesn't work like that. It has to be a real sincere connection inside. And you can't just talk yourself into it. And talking about listening to your heart, it's not really just this heart that we have that's pumping blood or the heart center of our being. That's a doorway, a portal to higher self. So it's really that higher, bigger part of ourself that we're asking for support as far as our intuition. But to get there, to make that connection, that's been the nature of our work for the last 40 years, because what we have discovered is that universe works in patterns and rhythms and cycles. It works with things called archetypes. And what I mean by that is what you're seeing here on the screen right now is you have the diameter of the moon in miles is 2,160 miles. That same number of years gives us a zodiacal age. We're just moving into the age of Aquarius, which will last 2,160 years. And the number of degrees in a cube is 2,160. So what this means is there's a resonance, a harmonic resonance between this aspect of time, this aspect of measure, and a physical object like the moon, and this geometry. So when we start bringing geometries into our life that are built around some of these archetypical parameters, we start bringing that energy in. And when we bring that energy in, it's like what is here beside me right now. We start vibrating with it. It's like a C tuning fork that is putting out a tremendous universal tone. And we start going in rhythm with that tone. Because what's happened is with our computers and our cell phones and the stress of each day and all the toxins, we get separated out from what is natural. We get separated out from what is real. And so this is, by working with these different elements and these different tools, we can start bringing a more natural frequency into our lives. It's like stepping out of your apartment and suddenly feeling like you're next to a mountain stream with the sunshine and the flowers and everything going on in nature. There's a natural rhythm that's easy to come into. And so that's what's going on with the things that we're building. And here's another slide that shows that all these different platonic solids, when you add up the number of degrees on their faces, you can end up with the diameter of the sun, the diameter of the earth, the diameter of the moon. I mean,
Wow.
so many things that people go, this is mind-boggling. This isn't possible. It's coincidence, but it's beyond coincidence because it goes on with everything in the natural world that we can keep pointing to and drawing upon to create these tools that are resonant with what is natural and what is part of our lives and has been part of the universal life from before it was created. Because all of these platonic solids are therefore archetypes. They existed before the sun, before the moon, before the earth was brought into creation, because each of these elements was created upon these certain dynamic and archetypical master frequencies and designs and patterns.
You know,
I find this fascinating because I've always been obsessed by the Fibonacci sequence and
Mhm.
how it just once you become aware of it, you see it all the time in nature. It's wonderful. I'm so sorry,
absolutely.
Gail. I spoke over you. I do apologize.
Oh, no, no. So, Vanessa, one of the things that I really love about seeing all this, because, you could look at this and you could say, oh, this is math and it's very abstract and all of that stuff. But here's what I think is so incredible. We are living in a time where there are so many people who are feeling separated, disconnected. They're in pain because of that. There's unfortunately in our country, and I imagine in yours as well, and many others, there are very high rates of, devastating things like suicide because people aren't feeling that they belong. They're not able to reach out and work with the relationships with other people, with the earth, with animals, with everything that's here for us. And what this tells us is that we belong. There is something here that when we shift our minds to see that what's here is a part of us, we can depend on it. It's not some irrational, crazy thing that just happens to happen. Instead, there's something that we can really dig into and say, I belong here. I can feel connected. I am allowing myself to be able to receive what's here for me. And I think that's a big turnaround for so many people who are feeling the angst of separation. So the more that people come back to their center and, like Gregory was just talking about, are able to process life through the wisdom of the heart, through that heart expression, then so many of the things that I believe we're dealing with on the planet right now will take care of themselves, because the fabric of everything that is here for us really is the ability to love and accept and in truly be in a place of joy as opposed to a place of despair. Despair is separation and fear. And unfortunately, there's so much fear that's pervasive right now, but fear isn't real. It's not part of this divine archetype rather. It's something that's an aberration. So when we come back to experiencing and expressing our lives as multidimensional beings, then we can anchor back into who we truly are. And I believe that's where amazing healing takes place. And we are able to lift to another developmental level of what humanity really is.
I couldn't agree more, because the reason I'm an expert in anxiety and depression is because for years I was anxious and depressed. So when people say to me, I feel like this or I'm behaving like this, I say, yeah, I know what that feels like. I've done that. You're not special. You are actually legion. The world is, I sometimes feel like the whole world's crying and anxious. And even people that I found that have always been calm are being really affected by the continuum of negativity that's being fed to us via social media, the news, all the rest of it. And what we haven't been taught really, I feel, is to deal with almost the PTSD, because when we see a war on the TV now, we see it close up and really gritty. And then we switch it off and we don't expect to be affected by it. And I was talking about this the other day and I was saying it's very difficult, although I'm able to do it, to look at something like that and stay slightly removed. It's not that I'm not being empathetic. I'm just not letting it affect me. I'm not letting it come into my field and affect my vibration. But I will be, when I'm watching it, sending love to everybody that's suffering as a result. And that's the way. But most people don't have that mechanism or ability to do that. And I feel it's having a terrible effect on us. We call it the bad news now because there's just no good news, is it? Let's stick the bad news that sticks on,
And that's so critical what you're saying there, because we are creative beings. We're not just people who are at the mercy of whatever is going on around us. We're creative beings. We're co-creators. And so when we look at something and we say, I can make a difference. How can I make a difference? Does that mean I'm going to buy into that same line that's being repetitiously shown through social media, through the broadcast? No. It means I come back into my center and I connect with who I am. And through that, I bring another frequency. I bring another picture. I have words and expressions that make a difference. And I'll tell you something very interesting. Back in July, I had a very freak and very, very difficult accident that ended me up in the hospital in intensive care and spinal cord surgery and all kinds of things.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I'm still healing from that, actually. However, here's the thing I want to bring forward. I was in a place where I could have been in total anxiety when I was going through this. And instead, something happened. I moved into another level where I just knew at the core of my being that everything was okay. And I was in this, almost like a high in a way. It was like this altered awareness that I felt the connection, and I called on those connections to be able to get me through it. So I had no angst as I was going through it. As I was going into surgery, what I did was I meditated. I had, like a mantra that I was saying over and over again as I was being, anesthetized so that I wouldn't be aware when they went through surgery. And I was in a place where I felt divine grace. Well, as a result, things move in a very positive way. And so when I would have pain, rather than focusing on the pain, what I would do, and I still do this, is I just bring the love in. And I keep reminding myself that that's here for me, that that's the reality. Because the brain interprets these different impulses in us. And do I want my brain to interpret it as, this is horrendous, I can't stand it, I got to get out of here? Or do I want to train my brain to say, there is healing, there is love here for me. I bring it in. I allow my body to absorb this now. And over time, it is a key to the healing. So it's an amazing experience to do it. And, like we've talked about before, we have learned things not because everything is always this perfect picture, but instead we've developed the capability, the tools, the technology to stay connected. So when things happen, we've got a different perspective and we can be in that center of the divine, of what really is here for us.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? That when you step into it, you just can deal with any situation. It doesn't matter what it is.
Mhm.
A guy can crash into your car and start screaming at you. And instead of sort of leaning back and being scared, you sort of lean in and smile and send love. And it completely diffuses the situation. Well, listen, this is all fascinating stuff, but we're going to take a very quick break now. So that we can see an advert from our sponsors, the amazing LifeSpring card, which restructures water and is great for your health. And we're going to be back soon. So please stay with us because I've got Gail and Gregory Haig here. We're talking about really the universal language of alignment, of vibrational frequency, of consciousness, of connection. So stay tuned and don't miss out. See you in a minute.
Ignite your vitality. Meet the LifeSpring Gold Card, a quantum leap in wellness. Revitalize your bioenergy, boost stamina, ease aches and improve your mental focus. Shield yourself from electromagnetic frequencies emitted from cell phones, laptops and other smart technologies. Restructure tap water, revitalize food and harmonize everything around you. Elevate well-being with LifeSpring, made in the USA. Order today from VanessaElston.com.
And we're back. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm having an amazing conversation here. So, Gail, we finished off talking about sending love, having calmness, gaining divine inspiration, which leads me on to, because we haven't really talked about this yet, how on earth did you get all the information to make these amazing, wonderful mobiles, room hangings, geometric sacred shapes you've got hanging around you? They're absolutely beautiful. What made you do it? How did it come to you?
You want me to start?
Go ahead, you start.
Okay. For me, I actually spent about 10 years in the 70s working with different Eastern masters, learning different meditations, pursuing higher connection and knowledge. And then in the late 70s, 79, I built a pyramid with a friend that in today's dollars would be close to $250,000 for something that was only 10 feet high. And it had incredible crystals, a lot of energy. And we were taking turns sleeping in it. And for me, it set off my Kundalini, which means the energy from the earth started pouring through my body so strongly that I literally had holes being burned in my hands and in my feet, in the center chakras, just from energy moving through my body.
Wow.
And this energy that I used to think this is subtle energy, but this didn't feel very subtle at all. It opened me up to higher connections, to information and energies, consciousnesses that live in other realities that were able to start feeding me information. And they started sharing some of these geometries and things you see around us, and the way everything works and how it comes together. And so that's what started me on that path. And
I'm sorry, may I just ask you?
sure.
You say it came to you. How did it come? Did it come in dreams? Were you just mentally obsessed with it? Could you see it in your mind's eye? How did it get delivered to you?
Well, after I became more connected, I would ask and I would see. I would, if something needed to be altered, and this is what Gail and I do today. We will be, she'll be in meditation and she'll come and say they're wanting us to do something different, blah, blah, blah. And then we both tune into it and we hear it, we see it, we feel it, and we build the tools that we're being directed to build. And in this last book, it was almost stream of consciousness where we were just getting the information about the way things fit together and why they do and how we can tap into them and how we can build tools that will reflect, like a C tuning fork has to be constructed properly so it vibrates with a C tone. Well, to show you some other things that, well, I don't have to go into it now, but
Oh no, please do. I
you want
find
me
all this fascinating. I'm sure our viewers will. If you've got some slides, yes, please.
okay. Well, earlier you were talking about the phi ratio and how it shows up in spirals. Like here we have it, everything from the nautilus shell to sunflower heads, but this is the way the body is constructed. The length of the arms, the length of the fingers to the hand, and so forth. This is all working with phi ratio relationships. And you can find these same relationships in certain geometries. Like these three geometries here, not only relate to the phi ratio in the way they're constructed, but the number of degrees in each one is equal to taking the diameter of the moon, and if you add it to the diameter of the sun, where you reduce it in 2 levels of magnitude, because the sun is so big, but you bring it down to the 8,000 mile range, add that to the moon, and you have the same number of degrees in these geometries. So you see what's happening. We're working with the phi ratio. We're working with geometries that not only exhibit that, but they're in harmonic resonance with the moon and the sun. And if you go into many ancient scriptures, like the Rig Veda, which has 10,800 stanzas, and each stanza has 40 syllables to it. And if you multiply that 40 times the 10,800, you have the radius of the sun, 432,000 miles. So you see, in ancient scriptures, we're given these clues because this knowledge has been on this planet. And when you find things like even the number of bricks in an Indian fire altar are exactly 10,800. Clues.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
What-
goodness. This is like we've had a language and we've forgotten it, because I've always seen these symbols in churches and pyramids and ancient temples in India. You see them,
Right.
they resonated with me. I always was like, what are these? They can really almost feel them. So we've got this language that we've lost. And I was speaking to somebody about crop circles the other day, and he said they're mathematical communication, Vanessa. It's very easy to find out what they're saying. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And you know, I love what you're saying here. It's so important because it speaks to us, because it is a part of us. It speaks to us because at the core of who we are, it helps us resonate with all of creation, like what we were showing before. You know, with those spirals, when you look at just like a cabbage, and you see that there are these divine ways that it's created. As we are, there are divine ways. We're not just all thrown together somehow and then we come out in some glob. We actually have some real order here. So when we can resonate with that order, we're in good shape. And we know that when we're first born. You know, you look into the face of a newborn baby and you can see that divine sense. And that's what we are able to get back to when we're clearing the debris, when we get away from all the chatter, the things that distract us from who we are. And that's that part of coming back to soul, coming back to the source that created us. And then we are able to co-create in ways that can develop an outcome that is so far better than what we're seeing on our planet right now. We're capable of all of this. That's what's exciting. And we need that awareness. And so people go through experiences in their lives, whether they're crises, whether they're through meditation, whether they're through learning from another mentor or master, whatever it is. I believe that everyone has opportunities, but it's up to us because we're on a planet, we're in a mechanism that's free will, free choice. And when we come back and we can sidestep the ego that says, well, I know what all of this is, and instead come to a place of, I'm not sure I do know. Teach me. Let me hear it. Let me come to a place of understanding at a deeper level. Then we find our roots again. And when we do that, then we can explore the love inside. We can explore how we can create and develop our lives and receive, whether it's prosperity or fabulous relationships or whatever. We can all do that. It's really here for us. You look up in the, into the animal kingdom. We love to watch these shows that show birds and all different kinds of animals and how they dance together and how they perform for each other and how they do amazing, amazing things. And it always elevates me because there is something there that says, that's what is here. That's what's normal. That's what abounds around us. That's why when we're in a place and we hear the songs of birds, that beautiful flow of beautiful chords.
And perfectly in tune as well, not one wrong note.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. When you walk into it, like you were talking about some of the cathedrals, the blueprints of those cathedrals were based on sacred geometry. When you go into,
Well, yes, because I live in a medieval town called Bury St Edmunds, which dates back to, I think the Magna Carta was ratified there, and our arch to our ruins in the centre of town is over 1,000 years old, and all the ruins are covered in sacred geometry. And we have a huge cathedral that was rebuilt, and the architecture of it, when you stand underneath and you look up at all the interlocking arches, you can feel the sacred geometry and the alignment that that gives you. I mean, it's quite incredible. I think more people need to start. I mean, the point of this show is really to sort of wake people up and get them to start looking at life differently, and hopefully to make them realize that by being kinder, nicer, more loving, more generous, more empathetic, we can raise the vibration of the planet, because we really need to do that right now. As you said earlier, you know, the human crisis is far more of an emergency than climate change, really. I could talk to you guys all day, and we're running out of time. I want to draw attention to those wonderful things that are hanging there, because I'm sure everybody's saying, you know, surely she's not going to ignore them. Can you tell us a bit more about them? Because they're so beautiful. What do they do? What can they do for me if I was to hang them in my house?
Okay. Well, I just grabbed something that I have here that is a wand we move over people to help move energy in their body. And I'm going to do an experiment where I'm talking now to you and sending you love. And if I start talking through this and I send you love, I'm not changing my voice. But can you hear the difference when that's in front of me and when it's not?
I can feel the difference, actually. I mean, I am more tuned in, I suspect, than quite a lot of people. But the minute you put it over your mouth, it was like the resonance was moving into my body.
Right. That's it. You see, these geometries, this is like a filter in a sense, but it's not filtering something out. It's adding something to it. This geometry adds to my intent, so it goes deeper into you. It goes deeper into the structure of your being to support you in shifting that structure into something that is more in alignment with what naturally is. We've come out of alignment in so many of these places within our beingness. And so by working with these geometries behind me, I mean, this isn't something that...
Absolutely beautiful. I mean, I just want to, please can I have some? I'd love to hang them all over my house. What will each one do for me?
Okay, so this one has the number of degrees that if you were to take the diameter of the Earth and the diameter of the moon, add that together, you have the number of degrees in this geometry. So this is resonant with the Earth and the moon at 10,080 degrees. It's working with the phi ratio in the way it's constructed, just like that picture we saw of the man with his arms outstretched that is working with the phi ratio. And so by working with this form, and when it spins, we have motors that many of these are spinning on motors in our home where they're moving at a very precise speed. And this creates a field that starts to align us with that healing aspect of being in resonance with the Earth and the moon that are resonant with the way we are created, working with the same phi ratio. So you see how everything, the universe can't get away from it. And when we were talking about numbers earlier, it occurred to me so many of these churches, like the Roman Catholic Church, works with a rosary of 54 beads. In the East, the malas have twice that, 108. And both of those are numbers that when you turn them into degrees, you see that 5-sided pentagon, which is working with the phi ratio. The angles of each of the corners is 108 degrees. If you draw a line from the point of one side to the middle of another side, that angle that's down there is 54 degrees, just like in the Roman Catholic Rosary. So all of these numbers have come in to our lexicon, come into our lives in hidden ways, where it's pointing us back to how do we get in resonance with life? And by working with this geometry, we can start to experience that.
Wow, this is incredible, because I know that you work with people with PTSD yourselves, you work with people with anxiety and depression. Hanging one of these or putting it on a motor in my home so that it rotates, specific shapes are obviously relevant to specific conditions. If I had PTSD, and so many people have come back with that, could they just literally get one of your geometric shapes or several of them and hang them in their home? And what sort of time frame would it take for them to start to feel better?
Well, yes, and we started out working with just different kinds of geometries first, so that people could have that in their environment. And then one of the things that Spirit really came and said, look, people can't always have these things with them. And it's obvious that it makes a difference, because we saw things changed in people's lives, the way they felt, the way they were able to present themselves in their lives. And that's when we said, okay, let's have something that we can find a way to take all these different kinds of wonderful geometries and develop a technology that people can wear. So I don't know if you've noticed or not, but Gregory and I are both wearing these pendants that
I have, because I'm a bit of a magpie and I love a bit of bling, but they are truly beautiful.
Yeah.
They're made of gold, because that's a great
well,
connector.
They're not actually gold, because gold is so expensive that we would not be able to get enough to people. But what we do is we actually make these out of stainless steel, and then we offer it in one mode where they're plated in titanium. And that titanium gives it that beautiful gold. But there are these wonderful different geometries with 3 different perspectives on these plates that we have that are both inside and outside. And then there's enough space in here that we have how many different antenna systems?
At least 35 or so.
And
internally.
So these are all different systems that support us in being able to maintain those divine connections that you feel when you're in a beautiful place in nature, or walking into one of these sacred sites that you have near where you live in your town, or going into that magnificent cathedral where you can breathe fully again, so that we can reclaim access to all of who we are. And that's what I really particularly have been awed by these pendants, what they do for people, because we will have people that just spontaneously write us afterwards. We have these, since we've been doing this so long, we have tens of thousands of our products all over the world. And we'll have people come back and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe the difference in how I feel, the difference in how people are treating me. I remember there was a woman who, she worked in a prison system. And I mean, that's a rough place, right?
Yeah.
And she said the inmates were treating her so differently. There was a different level of respect and communication that took place. So it didn't necessarily change people's lives with what they were doing, but it changed with what was happening for them.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it brings us right back to what you were saying earlier about walking in when you're feeling rotten to a crowd of people that are having a great fun and a giggle. It sort of lifts your frequency up. So you've got jewelry that can do that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I am so upset. We're at the end of our time, and I could talk to you. I think you're going to have to come back on because I've got another 300 questions that I want to ask you. With 40 years in this field, you're making me feel like a complete novice, which is great because it's been such a learning experience. I can't thank you enough. Now, before you go, are there any top tips or a message that you'd like to give our audience?
Oh, what a great question. Do you want to go for that first?
Sure. So you ask, the fun part for me, you ask a question, I have no idea what to say, but I know when I open my heart that what comes through is always what's perfect. And that's something that each of us can learn to do and be comfortable with that connection inside. Because so many of us feel separate and feel wounded by what's going on in this world. And when we find that place of love within us, we are able to find that within everyone and everything. And then we feel connected and part of the whole. And so each one of us, when we start discovering that place and start exhibiting that love that we feel, that's what's going to slowly bring this world into a better place. Maybe more rapidly than we could ever believe. The world will start shifting, and it needs to. But it starts with each of us finding that love within ourselves first, and then just naturally expressing it to those that are around us and those that are in our sphere of influence. And that's the difference that is so powerful that each of us can make in this world and will make the difference in shifting the whole world.
Gregory, thank you so much for that. I think that really resonated with me, and I'm sure it'll really resonate with our viewers because it's free. It won't cost you any money, and it's just about spreading love, loving yourself, realizing that you are love, your love, and you can spread love wherever you go. Gail and Gregory, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real education, and thank you to all our lovely viewers who've tuned in again. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you this time next week on E360 TV on the Limelight Network. Love and light to you all. Take care, everybody.
Thank you and blessings.